In terms of today's agenda, we'll talk a little bit about, kind of Velosio and certainly our perspective on customers and their data journey. We'll explore, kind of just a little bit broadly, what prediction is, because it definitely isn't the magic 8 ball or, any of those sorts of things. And so we want to kind of clarify that. Also want to orient you to things that are available within D365, some essentials that make prediction possible. We'll talk a bit about Microsoft Fabric, the magic that is there. We'll talk about the process, and we'll leave plenty of time for questions and answers. So as you go through this, feel free to put those into the Q&A panel, as Jessica mentioned. So in terms of Velosio as an organization, we're a good-sized organization. If you're not familiar with us, we've been in business for 31 years. We've had the great fortune of serving 4,000 plus customers. We pride ourselves on the long-term relationship we have with those customers, and that really has allowed us to develop some expertise around the topic that we have today. Because if we didn't have a long-standing relationship with these customers, we would be obviously operating in a much more transactional type capacity. We've seen many of our customers go down the path of the data journey, which I'll describe in a moment. But just a little bit more with regard to Velosio. We're a highly decorated Microsoft partner, but we've also had the good fortune of being recognized outside of kind of the Microsoft partner ecosystem. And so we won't belabor the point, but just know that we're an organization that prides ourselves on excellence, and we would certainly welcome the chance, if we've never done business with you, to explore the opportunity to do so. And so from a customer perspective and from a data journey perspective, each one of you, each one of our customers is on what we would describe as a data journey. That data journey is really kind of your own unique approach to how you're leveraging data in your organization, the tools that you have available to you, the sources that you have available to you. And it's really our job, as the slide indicates, to meet you where you are on that journey. Plus, really, because of our expertise, particularly around Microsoft technology, help you to see where you can go so that you can potentially do more with your data. And so that's really kind of the full premise for what we do day in and day out. That's what I do in my role as a solution specialist here at Velosio. And let's go ahead and get into the topic. So what constitutes predictive analytics? Well, we're in the election season, so predictions are literally everywhere. I think that we cannot probably escape that. But there's a science behind a lot of the predictions that we encounter on a daily basis, whether that be weather forecasts and, what's going to happen, over the next day, the next week, the next month, so on and so forth. Election results, as I mentioned, are pretty prominent right now, and they'll get even more ramped up in the weeks ahead. Some of you are naturally, following some predictions as it relates to things like stocks or sports outcomes. Tis the season for things like NFL, and there's also obviously elements that are kind of that longer term kind of predicted view around economic trends, whether it be growth or the potential of retraction and things along those lines. So let's talk about just a kind of a common scenario. So, one of our favorite predictions that we probably see every day is the weather predictions. And the weather predictions certainly are based on science and data science specifically. The elements that we see are predicted are things like temperature, the percentage of probability around precipitation, the likely wind amounts, those sorts of things. Those form up kind of a normal daily forecast, likely align with kind of a longer term view over a week-long period or something of that nature. Imprecision or the lack of precision around prediction means that too narrow of a set of data has been used. So if I look out the window and I use that as my only means of kind of figuring out what the weather's going to be doing, well, I might say things like, well, it looks like it's a nice day. An organization that's focused on sales, they're using too narrow of a data set. They might say, hey, our pipeline looks healthy. Or it might be one of those where we form the impression that oh, well, it's nice today. It's probably not going to rain over the course of this week. And then from a marketing standpoint, as it relates to sales, hey, I expect some good results from this campaign. Not really having a lot of data to support, kind of that thesis, means that you're really kind of less than precise in terms of the things that you're talking about. And, if we talk about that it should be a good week for weather or that we think that revenue is going to be great the quarter ahead, um, we need to really kind of have some things that kind of drive those predictions. And so staying in the realm of the example of weather, um, there are a number of things that, many of you are probably familiar with, but it still, bears, repeating. Um, it takes a village of scientific data to kind of really create the outcome that you see in the middle of the screen. And, there's a variety of different elements. Some of it is just naturally history, the historical trends of data and weather patterns. Now, if we solely use that, we'd be ignoring all the other facets of what are kind of changing within our environment and the environmental implications of kind of what changes. And so that's why the models that feed the weather predictions have to continuously be evolved and trained and working with kind of new things. And so there's a lot of computation that goes into that. And so you see, one of the items on the slide says supercomputers. It just basically is super computational is probably the better way to put it. But what you also notice is that we're calling out explicitly, kind of weather models and the numerical evidence. If you're tracking a particular storm, such as a hurricane, you'll notice there's a number of predictive models, and those naturally continuously are followed by the folks that are meteorologists or in the weather profession, in terms of supporting the prediction that they do. Other things that naturally influence this include other applications that are weather related. Specific instrumentation and devices that return data points. So that could be sensory information around temperature, and all the other kind of scientific elements. Could be naturally buoys that are attached to maritime kind of collection devices, and weather balloons as well. Radars. Those different elements again are informing us of the data points so that we can feed those to the model so it can support the prediction. And that is true of, kind of satellite data as well. So that all sounds like it's pretty involved, and it is, but there is a process behind it. There's a science behind it. And so, excuse me, the science behind working with data really involves, about 5 different steps in terms of, the way that this is depicted on the screen. And we'll walk through these different steps, but you can be assured that if you're using some pre-configured capabilities around the D365 platform that are supporting prediction, or you're exploring kind of rolling your own, this is going to be the process that is followed either more in a configured way within the D365 applications, or it's going to be a configuration that you're going to have to create to support the things that you want to do. So when we're talking about prediction, we're talking about things other than the weather. How does this all relate to sales? And so what we'll do is we'll talk a little bit about a few different areas. So demand forecasting is certainly a key area. It gives us the opportunity to predict, future sales, to optimize things like inventory levels, reduce the stock outs, or, kind of excess inventory. Beneficially, it gives us better inventory management, gives us the opportunity to lower or reduce, our holding costs of inventory, and kind of better support the alignment of supply with demand. You're not going to sell anything if you don't have it in stock or don't have the ability to fulfill that order. And so that is a big part of the kind of the first wave of this. Secondarily is customer segmentation, and with customer segmentation, what we're ultimately trying to do is identify distinct customer groups based on different behaviors, purchasing behavior, demographics, preferences as well. And the benefits there is it gives us the opportunity to really kind of tailor marketing strategies and ensure that the customers' experiences are very much personalized, and that making it personalized, kind of drives a level of affinity, within that segment, to not only drive increased levels of customer satisfaction, but also to ideally create some scenarios that the loyalty is a bit more preserved. So we'll get into that in just a moment as well. Churn prediction, that's one of the great opportunities for us to continue selling to our customers and ensuring that we understand what are the behaviors that cause them to leave. And so what we're ultimately doing is we're trying to identify the customer groups that are at risk to potentially kind of change, move on. We're looking at kind of purchasing behaviors. We're looking similarly to the segmentation, some elements of demographics and preferences, but we're doing so with the goal of a different benefit. And that different benefit is, how do we retain these customers? How do we proactively kind of target, this segment of customers that we want to make sure that we give them the right promotions to stay and help them feel the love, feel the desire to, kind of stay in the fold as far as our customer base without having to look outside of the relationship they have with us for other options. And the last one, which is probably going to be the most common, is organizations that are selling are obviously doing so based on the back end of lead generation. And so there's a real opportunity and a desire with lead scoring to basically help the organization differentiate between the highest quality of leads and possibly the lowest quality, because we obviously want to spend our time in the right places. And we ultimately want to work with leads that are going to evolve to some degree of a customer relationship, hopefully a long-term one, but it all starts with kind of that first transaction or that first interaction. So the benefits, we none of us organizationally have unlimited resources as it relates to sales, so we do want to obviously target our selling activities against those leads that have a probability of a good outcome. That's obvious, I think, for a lot of organizations. We naturally want to drive conversion rates that are a bit higher, and we want to support the increase in productivity, because the increase in productivity has really financial outcomes across the board, whether it's the individual seller, it's the sales team, it's the business as a whole. Those financial outcomes being revenue oriented tie right back into kind of the growth conversations that we're having across this webinar and the 2 subsequent webinars as well. So with all these things said around prediction and data, how does this really kind of relate to D365? And essentially there's some areas that we want to call out that you may not be familiar with, that we would want to help you investigate if you're not familiar. So getting straight into it, you'll notice on the left-hand side, we have the D365 ERP applications and D365 CE represented. You'll notice that we're calling out kind of a different kind of range of native prediction capabilities that leverage AI and machine learning to kind of enhance the business processes. And so, for example, Sales Insights gives us that predictive lead scoring that helps prioritize leads based on kind of their likelihood to convert. And so that goes right back to the things I was saying just a moment ago. It also naturally gives us the opportunity of scoring to identify those deals that are most likely to close, and allows us to put kind of a brighter light on those opportunities. Furthermore, the customer insights capabilities leverages AI to predict customer behavior, supports the segmentation of customers, and certainly allows us to support personalization of the marketing efforts. So all of those things happening within the CE environment naturally gives us the opportunity to really tap into those straight away. If you're an organization that's running CE and you haven't really tapped into any of these things, it's something that we're doing quite often with our customers, and so we would welcome the chance to help you explore that. What it also does is it naturally gives us some opportunity to kind of explore elements of customer churn, and some recommended actions around the retention of those customers. In addition, there's service elements, whether those be customer service insights that are really kind of driving the prediction around case resolution and the natural things that happen in terms of our service interactions with customers. It also gives us the opportunity to do some analysis around the sentiment for those customers that are giving us some feedback to kind of gauge the different levels of customer interaction. Also in the service realm is the opportunity to really explore field services and predict, kind of what's going to happen, with regard to equipment failures and the like. And I think I may actually have that on a subsequent slide. But lastly, on this slide, there's just naturally the demand forecasting pieces that allow us to see, kind of what's going on, particularly in the ERP around inventory management, ties to sales forecasting, greater supply chain visibility. Naturally, that gives us, benefits in a lot of different ways directly out of the applications. And there's some further elements that are kind of detailed here, for the sake of kind of flow of the webinar here. I'll leave these up just so folks can, pause and see them later on. But know that, the things that we've discussed on the previous slide, those naturally flow through to here. I will call out, for our CFO friends, there's an opportunity to really explore the financial insights. And I didn't mean to look past that, but that opportunity to predict things like, trends around cash flow, support for, budgeting and forecasting, that naturally is good, getting greater around the ERP product, as well as through some third-party products that we're always happy to help people understand in terms of their more robust kind of corporate performance management, budgeting, forecasting, and planning. Those are things that we can, certainly help you kind of navigate as well. And definitely don't want to lose sight of the fact that, there's other things that are out there around project operations, some of the commerce insights, some of those things, even human resource related that we just haven't had a chance to get onto the slide because there's just never enough room. So, so shifting gears just a little bit. One of my favorite topics, particularly since last November when Microsoft released this, is Microsoft Fabric. And so if you've not heard of Microsoft Fabric, you not necessarily are uninformed, but it is a technology that is becoming a lot more mainstream the last 10 or 11 months, given where we are here at the end of September, has really, naturally evolved to many of our customers taking up this technology in conjunction with the 365 environment that they have. And so what is Microsoft Fabric? Well, it's everything about data. And, I've heard Microsoft say this enough that it became a quote on a slide. Data is the fuel for AI. And so when we talk about prediction, when we talk about data science more broadly, AI is certainly in that vernacular. And all those things that are data science related are fueled very much by the data that we provide to it. And so if you're not familiar with Microsoft Fabric, the picture that you see on the screen gives you kind of the totality, but I'll walk through it just briefly. So down at the bottom is OneLake. OneLake is basically the storage paradigm, and Microsoft Fabric is a SaaS application that provides a multitude of different capabilities. OneLake is the foundation for storage, so it's a data lake. On top of the OneLake are different tools that will help us bring data into the OneLake environment, such as Data Factory. There's tools that actually allow us to present data from the OneLake environment, such as Power BI. In the middle, the items that are labeled Synapse are effectively just different kind of perspectives or workloads that can be applied to it. So data engineering really implies that there's a lot of kind of transformation that happens with the data. Data warehouse is a specific kind of means of storing and presenting the data in a very structured way for the business. Synapse real-time analytics is an opportunity for us to really capture data real-time from a multitude of sources, be it IoT devices or others. Typically sits a little outside of or adjacent to the D365 applications. And then the Synapse Data Science is really kind of the full tooling that supports the building your own kind of predictive models and other machine learning activities. And won't leave off Data Activator, but Data Activator is a tool set that is in preview at the moment. And what Data Activator does is it allows us to basically monitor Power BI reports and alert the business, alert users, and when exceptions occur, and even drive some automations around the Power Platform, which is super cool. So getting back to the science of working with data, we have the 5 different elements here, the first of which is get data itself. Get some water here. Sorry about that. But the get data pieces basically involve us connecting to the organization's sources of information. And so let's kind of look at this, in this particular slide. And so the organization sources that everybody's probably familiar with are the D365 sources, be it F&O, be it Business Central from the ERP standpoint, or the CE applications like customer service, sales, and marketing. So those elements are, really some primary or kind of first-class data sources that interact with Microsoft Fabric. You'll notice down on the bottom of the slide, we have kind of the different Fabric elements as well as the Power Platform, because Power Platform supports very much the capture of data from users that are maybe leveraging some of the processes of the D365 applications. So for example, at Velosio, we oftentimes are building Power Apps to give users a way of capturing data that lands specifically in the D365 applications for a particular area of focus. So maybe it's users that are out and working in a remote or mobile capacity. Well, they aren't necessarily going to go through quite the intensity of the screens that you'd see in the D365 applications, but they're still going to be feeding data points into that application and into that system. On the top right, you see the green box that has other applications. So you may be on ERP with D365, but you may have a different CRM or sales and marketing supporting application like Salesforce or HubSpot. You may be on a different ERP, such as Oracle NetSuite, or you may just simply have collections of data that have built up over time with your own line of business applications, potentially through other activities such as acquisitions of other businesses, or you may have somebody that really keeps a lot of institutional data in Excel files or other kind of departmental databases, and you want to make sure that that data is available to support the things that you're doing with your model. Beyond that, there's also the need to interface with other data sources that are maybe in the public domain, and that's where connectivity to things like APIs and web services and all of that comes into play. But let's talk a little bit more about the next step, which is preparing the data. And the preparation of the data, the cleansing of it, the manipulation of it, all of those things are done to ensure that we're driving some inputs for the model. And the inputs for the model, typically kind of manifest themselves as basically different data points that are independent variables that help with the prediction of the outcomes. Now, there's other words such as features and attributes that are part of the machine learning kind of vernacular, but know that we have multiples of inputs, we have a few predicted outputs. That's typically kind of the way that things work. If we drill in on this, specifically to things like demand forecasting, you'll notice that the inputs really start to take shape in the form of historical sales, some market trends, promotions, the economic indicators, the seasonal influence. So, there is a degree of seasonality in a lot of cases around, demand for certain items. We have a lot of customers that are in the agricultural business. We have a number of customers that are kind of feeding into the supply chains that happen within the retail operations. Obviously, in the retail kind of time of year, the holidays tend to be king in a lot of cases, but also the influence of competitor data that where it can be made available would support and drive, some of the forecasting that we would do around demand. Certainly the inventory levels and gosh, coming full circle back to weather data, so if some organizations that we work with, weather is very much an influence. We talked about kind of the agricultural and cannabis, kind of industries, but we also have customers that are in the service side of things where their people are outbound servicing customers, and particularly in the HVAC area, we have a number of customers that are leveraging weather data to kind of support identifying, kind of what the demand is on their business for their products or services. So, changing the orientation a little bit, when we talk about customer segmentation, there's some interesting words here that I'll try and kind of explain them a little bit better. So, we have naturally kind of demographic data, and the demographic data, it's generally related to the individual customer. So, kind of what age are they, or what kind of age range are they in? There's some gender elements to it. There's also kind of income and education levels, and occupations can naturally provide some of that influence. And some of that we can directly attain from our customers. Other times, it's stuff that's possibly provided by external services. But more importantly, there's other, kind of characteristics such as the geographic data. So, particular placement, whether it be in a country or a region, or even getting very specific to kind of city and state and zip code. And with the precision that we get out of that geographic data, it allows us to understand, is this an urban type customer? Is this a rural customer that we're really trying to kind of fulfill? From a behavioral data standpoint, that's where we have the ability to kind of look back on the transactions that have occurred with our business in terms of purchase history or website interactions, whether or not, people are participatory in things like loyalty programs with our business. There's an interesting circle here called psychographics, which kind of sounds pretty intense, but it really is about, kind of the lifestyle, the interests, values and attitudes, that is shaping and will continue to shape, kind of how we segment customers as we go forward, because the world is a pretty diverse place, and, understanding, kind of those other kind of diverse attributes, help us naturally better segment the customers, as does technographics. And technographics is another kind of interesting word that really helps us understand where people are in terms of their adoption of technology. How do they prefer to be communicated with? How do they use devices? What devices do they use? Believe it or not, all of these things are being harvested about us all the time, and no positives or negatives here, but it just is happening, and it is influencing the segmentation of customers. As is, kind of naturally, the transactional data, in terms of, the sales that have occurred, the average value, the frequency of purchases, who buys beer and diapers on Saturday night, those kind of crazy scenarios. So, and, certainly how people choose to pay. And then lastly, where we do have the opportunity to get customer feedback, those survey responses or the reviews, the ratings, those interactions can influence what we do. That's why, amazingly, we can be in one application and transition to another, as we're online, and all of a sudden it feels like we're seeing stuff that's incredibly targeted to us, because it is. And it's driven initially by segmentation in the models, and then some other things. And that really kind of fills out the last circle, which is the internal scoring. And so there's all kinds of algorithmic things, depending on the business that you're in, that you might be doing to kind of score the customers and allow you to kind of figure out, which customers kind of fit into which kind of categories or models. So just continuing on, with, maybe the last example is lead scoring. And this, again, is one of those things that, you're going to get some immediate benefits just by the nature of using D365. But there's also, particularly as you start to expand the scope and look beyond a single D365 application, that there's other ways that lead scoring can be made to come into play. And so demographic information, really similar stuff. I don't think that I mentioned, like industry or kind of company size. That would certainly, kind of give us some insight into, are we dealing with a customer that is representing a prospective business that we would want to sell to, that fits the mold of our typical customers. Are they, kind of the Goldilocks thing? Are they too big, too small, or just right? And those are the things that we want to naturally understand, from a scoring standpoint. The behavioral data, there's things that, they've done in terms of, kind of how have they interacted with our organization, how many people have visited our website, what views, what pages have they viewed, if they've been responsive to opening email and clicking on links. These are all behaviors that, again, D365 marketing particularly, helps us, really kind of hone in on and capture. There's also, kind of the whole realm of social media and the interactions that are there, and content downloads, particularly gated content, where we obviously know the identity of the person that's pulling it down. I did skip over firmographics, which is another ways, kind of interesting words. Basically, it's just, the characteristics of the company that the contact is from. So the revenue size, the number of employees, the locality of the organization, the industry that they happen to be serving. Again, are they a fit, for us? And naturally that is either included or not. And then from an engagement metric standpoint, how often are we interacting with them? What is the duration of the kind of website visits? How have they been responding to surveys, feedback forms, things of that nature. And then the technographic data, this moves it up from the individual back into kind of the corporate space. And so there's a lot of information out there that's generally available with regard to the technologies that companies use. So are they, in the case of Velosio, are they a Microsoft-friendly organization? That certainly is kind of a leading indicator of whether, a person that's interested in learning stuff about Velosio is a really qualified kind of consumer of information about us or not. And, then, kind of the full range of additional things that they might be doing with technology in terms of, kind of areas of interest, the current trends, those sorts of things. The quality of the lead is oftentimes tied back to how was the lead acquired. So if this was something that came in more of kind of a bulk activity, it might be, kind of less, less favorable versus where we organically discovered through search. Was it a referral from a partner website? Was it, the result of some paid advertisements? Those sorts of things, all of which can kind of naturally come into play. And then, if we have had the experience with that company previously, we can understand their past interactions, around potentially purchases, or some customer service type interactions, or, even kind of the communication. But again, this is more than just, one D365 application. This is likely going to start looking across, kind of the full estate of data that you have, to ensure that we're getting the right information out of it. And lastly, again, is, any algorithmic things that you do around scoring. So spend a lot of time on that, but it's only because it's really important to understand that these are the things that really drive what you get in terms of outcomes around prediction. Somebody can lick their finger and put it up in the air and it'll tell them, where the wind is potentially coming from, but it ain't going to tell you much else. And so all these data points naturally give you that better opportunity to predict and understand, more about your customer, and therefore influence the activities that you take on from a sales standpoint. But those aren't the only pieces of the process. And so to kind of double click or drill down on kind of the remainder of the process, we'll keep it at kind of this level, but note that we've got to train the model. So, the training of the model is either something that we do purposefully within the Microsoft Fabric environment. And it happens more in an automated fashion for subsets of the predictive functionality that's within the D365 applications. But what we're doing is we're basically applying kind of the algorithmic approach. We're understanding kind of what data points relate to one another. So not all data points are equal. Not all data points, give us, the right level of prediction. Time of day, the weather outside, few other kind of related characteristics. That's going to tell me if people are going to be thirsty or not, and those sorts of things. And so we build the models based on that information that we have. But that training the model, it doesn't just stop there. It's kind of our first pass, if you will. Then we basically run tests against that. So the data that we already know the outcomes for, were people thirsty? Did they buy drinks? Whatever the case might be, we're feeding that through, and we're saying, okay, how good was our prediction? Did we actually predict, who was the thirsty ones or not? And it allows us to understand that, okay, the color of the clothing they were wearing had nothing to do with their thirst level, so we can exclude that, and things of that nature. And then we naturally kind of take on the responsibility to improve. And that training and improving is kind of a continuous process, and it's something that we naturally follow quite a bit. And it can be fully automated. It can be one of those things that you have data scientists that are literally monitoring the evolution of the models to make sure that things are going well. If you're an organization that says, gosh, I never thought I would have a data scientist, you don't necessarily have to have a true data scientist, for these things. Velosio is fortunate that we do have that capability under our roof, but what we do is we can set things up in such a way that others that are kind of data minded within your business can monitor some of these activities and can actually, provide feedback. And what's great about it is with all of these things that sound super technical, the insights themselves naturally can show up in a variety of different places. And so, if you're a Microsoft-oriented organization, which I imagine many of you are, there's really a great opportunity to naturally bring these predicted results to kind of everything that you see in the graphic on the right-hand side. Not only are we able to kind of push that information out, but one of the other things that is very formative, but it is naturally coming online, is the capability to capture more and more information about the communications and the interactions that are happening, within your organization with customers as you try and kind of fine tune the things that you do. And so underneath all of the Microsoft products is basically a graph database, and that graph database is something we can talk to you about in terms of ways that you can better understand those interactions and activities, ideally supporting some of the predictive models that you want to take on. And it naturally supports kind of a lot of the elements of process automation, in terms of prediction and where activities go, which will be the focal point of our next webinar. But to really kind of pull things back into kind of a bigger picture that is one that candidly we use often, with our customers. Starting on the left-hand side, you have kind of the legacy Microsoft Dynamics icon. There's certainly a path there that feeds into Power BI, and with kind of Power BI, that has kind of been the core that people have been interacting with the data. As they've moved into the D365 applications, that's where there's a better opportunity to put the data into one lake, whether we're talking Business Central or we're talking finance and operations through the Synapse link, we're talking the CE applications through things like Dataverse. We naturally can bring it into that fabric context, have data from multiple applications, support the things that we want to do around data warehousing, leverage data science, and even, kind of promote, kind of the alerting scenarios around Data Activator. The semantic models that you see here, it's just basically a nice way to organize the data and ensure that the information is relevant for the stakeholder audience, meaning finance team is generally going to be wanting to look at financially oriented data. Sales team is going to want to have, kind of their own corresponding data sets. Why not have it all in very consumable models that can then feed, Power BI. And also threw up on this slide the customer insights piece. This is just naturally to portray the things that happen within D365 that are naturally supporting elements of the prediction that we're talking about. There is an opportunity to leverage that information too and bring that into the Fabric environment. We won't go into like super depth, but just know that there's different ways that you can really take full advantage of this based on the Fabric investments that you've made. And so, from envisioning kind of the platform for predictive solutions, well, we've got the 5-step process in the middle of the screen. We've got Fabric as its own kind of entity on the very bottom. That's where a lot of the interactions happen as it relates to data. We naturally have plenty going on within D365 around some of those predictions that we described. And I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Power Platform can feed into this as well. So prior to Fabric, Power BI, Power Apps, and Power Automate were all part of the Power Platform. They still are, but Power BI is also part of the Microsoft Fabric family. And what's really cool for us when we're helping customers around these predictive elements is now with the Power Platform, well, we can automate things like notifications that come out of the system. We can give an easier means of kind of monitoring, how the models are performing and, the execution of them. We can naturally, kind of through things like co-pilots as well, support, kind of proper business level communications. And we won't lose sight of the fact that Power BI is always going to be, a great technology for delivering information through analytics via reports and dashboards and things along those lines. And so from our perspective, there's some benefits that we would naturally want to call out to you. Firstly, with working with Velosio around these predictive elements of D365, you're going to get an organization that obviously has a wealth of experience and expertise that's been built up over a large period of time. I think that many organizations are struggling because you're trying to, as humans, kind of correlate a lot of data to kind of make your own predictions, and that it just is never a very precise exercise. Similar to kind of looking out the window and trying to figure out what the weather is going to be for a week. It's just a bit hard, and that's where we really encourage organizations to kind of have a data first mindset and really naturally embrace their data and ways that they can use that data to kind of take away the strain and the stress of trying to figure out, kind of where the business is going. We naturally, because of our experience, we're going to help you reduce the risks of overinvesting, kind of your team members' time, collecting and trying to parse data and information, and not necessarily being, in the spot where you can support making insights and decisions, but naturally, being a little bit more consumed with just the business of getting data. We don't want that to happen. We can make that happen much more seamlessly. And there's some other benefits that are on here, but if we really kind of call out the most final way is we really want you to leverage technology and data as assets to really inform your business on ways that you can much more repeatedly increase your revenue. So with that, and beyond this webinar, I would just say if you've got a desire to, learn a bit more about, these things, we're happy to do demonstrations. We're happy to, double click on native D365 predictive capabilities. Just didn't quite have the window of time here today to run through all of those, but we would love the opportunity to personally do that with you. If you are thinking about things that you want to predict within your business that maybe sit outside of or leverage data from multiple applications, again, we're very much, data science oriented in the things that we do around machine learning, artificial intelligence, the Fabric platform. We often are doing pilot projects just to support kind of putting your toe in the water, understanding kind of how it works. And certainly we're always up for a deeper conversation. My contact information is on the screen. So I'd highly encourage you to reach out to me. If you have a relationship with someone else in Velosio, let them know that you're interested in talking about this, talking about data. They'll naturally get back to the right folks. If you have questions, feel free to post them right now in the interface. And with that, Jessica, I'll just kind of turn back to you and see if we have any questions to answer.
Yes. So again, feel free to add any questions as we go along. I'm going to bring up some that are common ones that we start to see when we're having these conversations. With the first one being, can we leverage prediction with Dynamics 365 and some of the other external capabilities of Microsoft Fabric?
Can do. So the graphic that I kind of started to show, had like some of the customer insights pieces. And so naturally you can have customer insights being its own kind of collection of data, and that can feed into Fabric as well. And so there's a real strong opportunity to kind of blend both. And we would love the opportunity to kind of talk through that with folks.
Can predictive results show up in Power BI? And then the same question kind of applies for native applications like CRM.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So, so within Power BI, everybody kind of thinks it's just going to there to report the information that has already happened or transpired. Prediction basically gives you kind of that look forward and allows for that data to show up in Power BI reports, helps you understand where sales potentially are going to be in the next, month, quarter, whatever the case might be. And that equally can show up within the applications. And so our team, across Velosio is oftentimes bringing data from other applications or other processes into the user interfaces of D365 so that users that are there contextually looking at an account in CRM or, looking or interacting with, a customer within the ERP, they naturally have those other data points that are available to them, including predictions, like is it a good or a bad customer? So.
Mm-hmm. Would predictions drive workflows? If so, what technology is used to make that happen?
So they can, and that's where some of the predictive stuff kind of ties over to Power Automate, the logic apps, the things that would naturally kind of say this is likely to happen. Therefore, whether it's a sales organization or operational organization, Joe or Sally employee be alert to the fact that this is happening and then notifying. That's a pretty common scenario that organizations get to at kind of a later stage in their data journey.
So say if someone has an older Dynamics ERP and Dynamics 365 CE, can they use data from both?
They can. They would be using Fabric most typically to kind of blend the data from both together. What we don't really encourage, is legacy dynamics. We'll call that the square pegs, and D365 CE are the round holes. And you don't want to be trying to force too many of the square pegs into the round holes. But Fabric is this great place where you can drop, whatever geometric size the data is into it, and then relate it to one another.
And how do we figure out what helps us predict results for our businesses?
So that's really kind of part of the data science approach. So you can start with 10, 20, 100 different kind of data points, that would all be considered kind of variables about the thing you're trying to predict. And then as you kind of feed it through these models, they naturally say, hey, these 10 items out of 50 correlate best with each other, and they allow us to predict, kind of the end result. And so it's the process of kind of going through that data science, and it can be a very rapid process. I mean, we do pilots all the time that are a week, a couple of weeks, just to get people, kind of thinking about how they would do things. And so we would highly encourage, if people want to explore something like that, to reach out and let us know.
Awesome. And with that, what I'm also going to do is I'm going to add in the chat the link to the series itself. So like Trey mentioned, we do have 2 additional parts that are going to happen within this series. This is the first part, and you'll get that replay. But I want to make sure everyone has the link as well. If you want to add on additional sessions, you can also do that as well.
Awesome.
All right. And if there's any other questions, you can pop them in the chat. I think we're pretty good to go. But of course, you can always reach out as well.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you for the support, Jessica. And this was fun. We look forward to talking more with people about data, more about prediction. And